Welcome to this deep dive into the state of enterprise cybersecurity in Nigeria,
Yeah.
especially when we're looking ahead to 2025 and how to secure those really vital ATM networks and POS devices. We've got a whole stack of white papers, brochures, reports to dig into, and you're going to hear all about the unique challenges and how one innovative company, Abatis, is tackling these things head on. So think of this deep dive as a shortcut to understanding the cybersecurity landscape in Nigeria, what's really at stake, and why it matters to you, particularly if you're a CSO or part of an IT team, or maybe even a C-level executive at a fintech or bank in Nigeria.
Yeah, what's so interesting about Nigeria's digital landscape is it's like this microcosm of global trends, but with its own distinct flavor. The Central Bank of Nigeria has been very vocal about this rising threat of AI-powered attacks. And we're seeing them. They're getting more and more sophisticated, more automated, and much harder to detect.
But let's break down this whole AI threat a little bit more, because I keep seeing things like polymorphic malware and even deep fakes mentioned in these reports. It almost sounds like we're talking about a sci-fi movie.
Right. It might sound futuristic, but it's very much our reality now, polymorphic malware. That's the kind that can actually change its form to dodge those traditional security systems. And deepfakes, well, think about it, incredibly realistic fake videos used to manipulate employees or even customers.
Wow, okay. That's a little bit sobering when you put it like that. And this isn't just theoretical, right? I mean, we've seen real-world examples of these AI-powered attacks in the financial sector already, haven't we?
Absolutely, we have. The Carbonot Group is a prime example. They used AI-powered phishing to get into bank networks, and they eventually got remote control of ATMs, causing losses of over $1 billion.
$1 billion, that's just mind-blowing. And then there's this Plautus D malware I keep hearing about. Is that another example of AI in action?
Plautus D is a very sophisticated malware that attackers physically install on ATMs. It lets them basically dispense cash whenever they want.
Right.
While it doesn't use AI itself, it really highlights how vulnerable ATMs are to these very targeted attacks.
So it seems like we're in this constant arms race. Attackers are using AI to their advantage, but then, going back to the source material, AI is also being touted as a really powerful tool for defense.
Exactly right. AI can analyze patterns in real time and can identify and neutralize those threats before they can even do any damage. A lot of leading cybersecurity companies are investing heavily in AI-driven defenses.
It makes you wonder, though, about the cost of all of this, because I'm seeing this trend towards more affordable, locally sourced security solutions, particularly within Nigeria.
Yeah, and that's such a crucial point. The big question becomes, can these indigenous security providers offer the same level of protection as these global players, especially when it comes to the cutting edge of AI-powered defense?
They're a balancing act, isn't it? You're trying to find cost-effective solutions, but you can't compromise on security.
And that's where thorough due diligence comes in. Organizations really need to carefully evaluate what these local providers can do, their track record expertise, and especially their ability to keep pace with these evolving threats.
And then our sources highlight another challenge, this whole issue of third-party risk. It seems like every connection we have, from cloud apps to payment gateways, is a potential entry point for these attackers. How can organizations in Nigeria effectively secure this whole interconnected ecosystem?
You've got to think of it this way. Every third-party API is like an open door into your systems. It's not enough to just secure your own network anymore. You have to make sure every vendor you work with has really robust security practices in place.
So thorough vetting, continuous monitoring, and maybe even some contractual obligations to enforce those security standards.
Exactly. And let's not forget about this ticking time bomb, the legacy systems.
Yeah.
That white paper on ATM security, it paints a pretty alarming picture. A lot of ATMs are still running on outdated operating systems like Windows XP, which are just riddled with vulnerabilities.
It's scary to think that these systems responsible for dispensing millions of naira are running on software that hasn't been supported in years.
Yeah, the cost of upgrading can be significant, but the potential cost of a breach is far greater. Organizations need to weigh those risks really carefully and make a plan to address those legacy systems. Abatis is interesting because they focus on what they call operating system immutability. So they're essentially creating this protected environment where unauthorized changes to the system are impossible.
So even if an attacker got in, they couldn't download malware or tamper with critical files because the operating system is basically locked down. That's pretty impressive.
And that's just one part. They also have this centralized management console, the CMC. It gives security teams that real-time visibility and control over all Abatis-protected devices.
So it's not just about securing individual devices. It's about having this central command center to monitor and manage security across the entire network.
Exactly. And what makes Abatis especially relevant to our discussion today is they've established a dedicated presence in Nigeria. They recognize the unique cybersecurity challenges that organizations here face.
Tell me more about this local presence, because I'm seeing a lot about a cyber NOC in Abuja. What exactly does that entail?
They've set up a fully operational cyber network operations center, or cyber NOC, in Abuja, and it's equipped with a central management console that can protect something like 100,000 devices. So they have local expertise right on the ground, ready to support Nigerian businesses in this fight against cyber threats.
Wow, that's a significant commitment to the Nigerian market.
hmm
But I'm curious, how exactly does this Abatis technology work? What makes it so different from traditional security solutions?
Let's dive a little deeper into the technical side. Abatis uses something called hardware-dependent file filtering, or HDF,
Yep.
to secure devices at the file system level.
HDF. So
Yeah.
is it kind of like having a security guard at the entrance to every file, checking its ID, making sure it's allowed to enter?
That's a pretty good analogy, but instead of just checking against a list of known threats, HDF actually analyzes the structure and the behavior of each file. It knows what a legitimate file should look like, and it can instantly block any attempts to create, modify, or execute files that don't meet those criteria.
So even if a brand new, never-before-seen malware tries to sneak in, HDF can still block it because it doesn't match the blueprint of a legitimate file.
Exactly. And because HDF operates at the kernel level of the operating system, it's incredibly difficult for attackers to bypass or disable it.
This sounds incredibly powerful. But what about authorized changes? Surely you can't just freeze the entire operating system in time.
Hmm.
What about software updates or installing new applications?
Yeah, that's where the Abatis system is really elegant. Authorized administrators can disable protection temporarily for specific tasks like installing updates or approved applications. But even during those windows, HDF is still monitoring those actions super closely, making sure nothing malicious gets through.
Oh, so it's like a security system with a built-in override, but one that's still watching everything very carefully.
Yeah.
So we've got HDF acting like this super vigilant guard at the file system level. But what about that central command center we talked about, the CMC? How does that fit into all of this?
Remember that cyber NOC we were talking about in Abuja? Well, the CMC is basically the brains of that whole operation. It's collecting real-time data from all the devices on the network that are protected by Abatis, and it gives security teams that really comprehensive view of their whole security landscape.
So instead of having to go through tons of data from all these individual devices, they've got this centralized dashboard that shows them what's happening.
Exactly. And Abatis goes a step further. They generate what they call empirical data, which means their logs only record actual genuine events. So it cuts out all that noise and all those false positives that can really overwhelm security teams.
Oh, wow. So it's about seeing the signal through all the clutter, making life way easier for those security analysts and letting them focus on real threats.
Precisely. And because Abatis neutralizes threats in real time, sometimes within nanoseconds, security teams can shift from being reactive to proactive. They can focus on addressing the root cause of an attack instead of just constantly playing catch-up.
It all sounds incredibly promising, but I'm always a little skeptical of these silver bullet solutions.
Yeah.
Are there any real-world examples of how Abatis has actually helped organizations, make their security better?
Oh, yeah. There are a bunch of compelling case studies. One that comes to mind is their work with a major European bank that was having a really tough time securing their ATM network. They were facing constant attacks, especially from sophisticated malware like that Plownesty we talked about, and their existing security solutions just weren't cutting it.
So they were stuck in that reactive cycle, always trying to patch vulnerabilities and clean up after attacks.
Yeah, exactly. It was really costly and it ate up a ton of resources. But once they deployed Abatis, they saw a huge drop in attacks. Their ATMs were suddenly much more resilient, and their security team could finally get ahead of the curve.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful testament to the effectiveness of this whole proactive approach. And it sounds like Abatis has benefits that go way beyond just better security too, right?
Absolutely. One of the benefits people often overlook is increased efficiency. Because Abatis generates much less log data than traditional tools, it really lightens the workload for security teams.
So less time going through logs and chasing false alarms, which frees up those resources for more strategic work. That's a big win for any organization, especially these days when cybersecurity talent is so hard to find.
And there's another surprising benefit, lower energy consumption. Because Abatis is so lightweight and efficient, it can actually reduce energy consumption by as much as 20%.
So it's not just good for security and efficiency, but also for the environment. That's got to be a pretty compelling message for organizations that are focused on sustainability.
It really is a win-win-win. Stronger security, a more efficient security team, and a smaller impact on the environment.
We've talked about HDF, the CMC, and some pretty impressive real-world benefits. But I'm always curious about the future. How's Abatis preparing to address this constantly evolving threat landscape, especially with those AI-powered attacks we were discussing earlier?
Well, one thing that sets Abatis apart is their focus on compatibility and integration. They've designed their solution to work seamlessly with a whole range of operating systems, including those legacy systems that are so vulnerable. They're also always working on new integrations with other security tools and platforms.
That makes sense. In the real world, organizations depend on a whole ecosystem of technologies. So you need security solutions that can work well with everything else.
Exactly. And Abatis is keeping a close eye on these new technologies coming out, things like blockchain and quantum computing. They're exploring how to use blockchain to enhance security and auditing, and they're already thinking about how quantum computing might impact encryption algorithms.
So they're not just reacting to the threats they see now, they're anticipating future challenges and developing solutions to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. That forward-thinking mindset is really crucial in cybersecurity because the landscape is always changing. But beyond the technology itself, Abatis brings something else to the table, a real commitment to local expertise. That cyber NOC in Abuja really makes a statement.
It shows that they're not just selling a product. They're investing in Nigeria, building relationships, and they're really trying to understand the unique challenges that organizations here face.
That's absolutely essential for building trust and making sure that the solutions are tailored to what the Nigerian market really needs. And that brings us back to you, our listener. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what this all means for you. We've been exploring the cybersecurity landscape in Nigeria, the rise of those AI-powered attacks, and how companies like Abatis are tackling these challenges head-on. But how can you apply these insights to your own organization?
That's the key question, isn't it? If you're a CISO or part of an IT team or maybe a C-level executive at a fintech or a bank in Nigeria, you need to be asking yourself, how confident are you in your organization's current security? Are you really prepared for the sophisticated attacks that are probably coming in 2025 and beyond?
It's easy to get complacent, especially when things seem to be going okay. But as we've seen, the threat landscape is constantly changing, and what worked yesterday might not be enough today. You need to be prepared for when a cyber attack happens, not if it happens.
Cybersecurity is all about managing risk. You might not be able to stop every single attack, but you can seriously reduce your exposure and minimize the damage if you take the right steps.
And that's where proactive security comes in. It's about changing your mindset from reaction to prevention. It's like building a digital fortress around your systems so those attacks can't even get in.
Think about Abatis. They've got a solution that focuses on immutability, which means locking down the operating system so unauthorized changes are simply impossible. It's a real game changer because it neutralizes so many threats before they can even do anything. And we've talked about the rise of these indigenous security tool developers in Nigeria. Are you taking advantage of the resources and expertise that are available right here in your own backyard? Remember, these local companies really get the nuances of the Nigerian digital landscape, which can be a huge advantage.
And don't forget, cybersecurity isn't just an IT problem, it's a business problem. It needs to be a top priority for everyone in the organization, from the executives down to the front lines. Invest in training and awareness programs to make sure your employees understand how important cybersecurity is and how to spot potential threats. Remember, proactive security isn't a luxury anymore. It's a necessity in today's world where everything is so connected. Yeah, it's easy to kind of fall into that trap thinking, well, we haven't been attacked yet, so we must be doing something right.
Right. It's like saying I haven't had a car accident yet, so I don't need a seatbelt. Cybersecurity, it's all about managing that risk.
Yeah.
You might not be able to prevent every single attack, but you can really minimize that potential damage, if you just take the right steps. So let's talk about those steps. What are some concrete things that CISOs, IT teams, C-level execs, the people in charge at fintechs and banks in Nigeria, what can they actually do to improve their cybersecurity, especially when we're talking about securing those ATM networks and POS devices?
Well, the first thing you got to do is look at your current security. Where are the weak spots? What are the most important assets you need to protect, and what threats you're actually facing? So it's about taking that step back, looking at the big picture, not just zeroing in on individual systems or devices, but really understanding how they all work together and where those weakest links are.
Exactly. Once you have a good handle on where you stand, you can start to develop a proactive security strategy. That means going beyond just reacting to things like patching those vulnerabilities after they've already been exploited. focusing on preventing those attacks in the first place.
And we talked a lot about Abatis and their whole approach to immutability. Is that something that organizations should really be looking at seriously?
I think it's a total game changer, especially for securing those critical systems like ATMs and POS devices. By locking down the operating system, you're essentially taking away a whole category of attacks. It's like having this fortress around your most valuable things.
And remember, they have that cyber NOC right there in Abuja with a central management console that can protect a huge number of devices, up to 100,000. I mean, they're not some distant company. They're right there on the ground, ready to support businesses in Nigeria.
Absolutely. And whether you go with Abatis or another solution, the important thing is to find a partner who gets your specific needs and can work with you to create a security strategy that's tailored for you.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've talked about the changing threat landscape and those AI-powered attacks and how important proactive security is and the solutions that are being developed right here in Nigeria.
Hopefully you've gotten some good insights, things you can take back to your organization and actually start putting into practice.
So here's one final thought to leave you with. The future of cybersecurity isn't just about the technology. It's really about mindset. It's about having a culture of security where everyone in the organization understands that protecting data and systems is crucial.
It's about not being afraid of getting attacked. It's about having the confidence that comes with being prepared.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into cybersecurity in Nigeria. We hope you found it informative and, most importantly, useful. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay ahead of the game.